Protest against Israeli war crimes as anti-Semitism has failed miserably. There are 77 UN resolutions against Israel, and the recent failure by the Americans in the UN, where not even a single vote was cast by any other member of the Security Council in favor of Israel's indignation that the world has unequivocally rejected the idea that Israel should be given a free hand to oppress the indigenous Palestinian people. People of conscience around the world are saying enough is enough. We are delighted to invite our next speaker, who is an activist for peace and justice. Mr. Dimitri Lascaris is a lawyer, journalist, and activist. In 2012, the Canadian Lawyer magazine named him one of the 20 most influential lawyers in Canada. In 2016, he served as Justice Critic in the Green Party of Canada's shadow cabinet. He is currently chair of the Board of Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East and a board member of the Real News Network. I'd like to call him up. Please give him a warm welcome.
A legendary revolutionary once said that if you tremble with indignation at every injustice, you are my comrade. Welcome today, my comrades. We are here because we tremble with indignation. We tremble with indignation at the theft of East Jerusalem. We tremble with indignation at the settlements in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem that constitute a clear violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention, as has been repeatedly acknowledged by our own government and by the United Nations Security Council. We tremble with indignation at the mass slaughter of unarmed protesters in Gaza during the Great March of Return. We tremble with indignation at the torture of Palestinian children, a heinous crime that has been repeatedly documented by human rights organizations like Amnesty International and by B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights organization. For the Palestinian people, the state of Israel has become a house of horrors. And in the top floor, in a luxurious loft, reside Benjamin Netanyahu and his wife Sarah, both of whom have been recommended for indictment for corruption by Israeli prosecutors. This is our dear ally, Benjamin Netanyahu. On the ground floor reside the Israeli people, who are free to come and go as they please from this edifice of apartheid. In the basement are trapped the people of Palestine, without light, without freedom, calling out for a shred of their dignity to be recognized by the international community. Today I want to talk to you about the foundation of this edifice of apartheid. The foundation of this edifice is the pro-Israel lobby in Canada. Because without the support of Western governments, the Israeli government could not for one moment get away with what it's been getting away with for decades. And our government would not be able to continue to support the crimes of the state of Israel if the public were being told the truth about what is being done to the Palestinian people. The essential function of groups like the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, B'nai B'rith Canada, and the Jewish Defense League is to bombard Canadians with the propaganda of Israel's apartheid regime and to silence that regime's critics. They have tried very hard, in fact, to silence this rally. Last year, under the guise of seeking to counter hate speech, pro-Israel councillor James Pasternak asked the city's executive committee to direct city staff to investigate the AlQuds rally. I attended the executive committee at which Pasternak's initiative was debated, and there I witnessed, my friend, something breathtaking. One of the proponents of Pasternak's initiative was none other than Mayor Weinstein, the director of Canada's Jewish Defense League. Unbelievably, Pasternak and our mayor, John Tory, warmly received Mayor Weinstein and did so within hours of my having delivered to them a letter in which I pointed out the following facts. Number one, a member of Canada's JDL was charged with a hate crime last year by Washington, D.C. police after the savage beating of a defenseless and elderly Palestinian man at the AIPAC conference. Number two, according to the widely respected Southern Poverty Law Center, the JDL is, quote, a radical organization that preaches a violent form of anti-Arab Jewish nationalism. Number three, In 2001, the Federal Bureau of Investigation described the JDL as, quote, a violent extremist Jewish organization. And number 4, last year, days after Mayor Weinstein delivered his sermon to the Executive Committee of Toronto City Council, the JDL brought to Toronto Pamela Geller, who has been described not by a radical media outlet, but by the New York Times, as follows: an anti-Islam campaigner with a long history of declarations and actions motivated purely by hatred for Muslims. This was the New York Times. Nonetheless, despite being made aware of these facts, the Toronto City Council's Executive Committee took advice about countering hate speech from a hate monger. The lobby's attacks on the AlQuds rally have been relentless. The Neighbourhood Canada claims, for example, as we've heard today already, that the speakers here have called for violence against Jews. That is false. The Palestinian people, like all peoples, do have a right to defend themselves against aggression. To deny them that right, while according that same right to the State of Israel, is fundamentally bigoted. Those who have spoken about resistance at past AlQuds rallies were simply recognizing the lawful right of Palestinians to defend themselves against aggression and oppression. But the right of self-defense, it is true, is not unlimited. Most importantly, that right does not entitle the party who is acting in self-defense to attack innocent civilians. And the organizers of the AlQuds rally have unambiguously recognized this very limitation on the right to self-defense in the statement of principles that you heard earlier today. Moreover, however lawful it may be for Palestinians to use force against an Israeli military that brutalizes them on a daily basis, this is not a military that can be defeated by force. As the largest recipient by far of United States military aid, this military is armed to the teeth, and the Palestinian people are virtually defenseless. Therefore, the only viable path to Palestinian freedom is peaceful resistance.
Hear, hear.
And I think that if the Great March of Return has demonstrated to us anything, it is that thousands, tens of thousands of Palestinians have understood this perfectly well. As human rights lawyer Noura Erakat recently stated on our own CBC radio, thousands of Palestinian Gandhis protested peacefully in the Great March of Return for the recognition of their internationally guaranteed right to return to their homeland. After these Palestinian Gandhis peacefully demonstrated for the right of return, Canada's pro-Israel lobby sought to smear them as terrorists. But the time has finally come to ask, who are the terrorists and who are their supporters? Is Israel's shooting of thousands of unarmed protesters not terrorism?
Yes.
Is Israel's demolition of Palestinian homes and other civilian infrastructure not terrorism?
Yes.
Is the destruction of Palestinian olive orchards by fanatical Israeli settlers not terrorism?
Yes.
And is the IDF's torture of Palestinian children not terrorism?
Yes.
If ever there was an act of terrorism, comrades, it is the torture of children. It was therefore with complete justification that Glenn Greenwald, a Jewish-American civil rights lawyer and a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, again, by no means a marginal figure, recently described Israel as, quote, an apartheid rogue terrorist state. A few months ago, I discovered that B'nai B'rith Canada had published on its website an expose of former Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin. In that expose, B'nai B'rith had the audacity to describe Menachem Begin as a Zionist hero. In 1948, as many of you may know, the New York Times published a letter signed by numerous Jewish dignitaries, including the great Albert Einstein and Hannah Arendt. That letter protested a visit to the United States by Menachem Begin and denounced his Freedom Party on the basis that it was, as they wrote, a political party closely akin in its organization, methods, political philosophy, and social appeal to the Nazi and fascist parties. According to Albert Einstein's letter, Menachem Begin's paramilitary group Irgun employed, quote, gangster methods and inaugurated a reign of terror. This is the individual whom B'nai B'rith Canada, which holds itself out to be a human rights organization, has characterized as a hero. In describing the Deir Yassin massacre in which Irgun had participated, Albert Einstein wrote, "The terrorists, far from being ashamed of their act, were proud of this massacre and publicized it widely." So, my friends, who are the supporters of terrorists in this scenario? These same lobby groups have alleged that the Toronto AlQuds rally foments anti-Semitism. That too is shamelessly false. Comrades, I want to leave no ambiguity about this. We are implacably opposed to all forms of racism, including anti-Semitism. That is what the organizers of this rally have declared in their statement of principles. And indeed, it is the very reason we have assembled here today, because we are opposed to a racist apartheid regime. Weeks ago, as reported by major news organizations like the Washington Post, Israel's chief rabbi described black persons as monkeys. Even the United States Anti-Defamation League, a staunch supporter of Israel, felt it necessary to denounce the chief rabbi of Israel. But to my knowledge, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, B'nai B'rith Canada, and JDL did not utter a peep of criticism. It therefore behooves us to ask this question as well. Who are the real racists? Those who defend an apartheid regime or those who condemn it? Here in North America, at the forefront of this noble struggle against Israel's racist regime, stand rapidly expanding groups of conscientious Jews, including Independent Jewish Voices Canada, Jewish Voice for Peace, If Not Now, Breaking the Silence, and our brothers and sisters from the Jewish community here today. Our brothers and sisters in the Jewish community understand full well, as do we, the value of human life, and that it does not depend on one's ethnicity or religion. All lives are equally deserving of our protection. All lives are equally deserving of freedom and dignity. We, my comrades, tremble with indignation at all injustices, whoever the victims of those injustices may be. Thank you very much.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
Netanyahu, you will see.
Palestine will be free.
Justin Trudeau, you will see.
Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
Thank you very much, Brother Dimitri. Over 85,000 Palestinians have been injured since the year 2000. As was mentioned in the speech, Jewish rabbis in New York have taken to the street and were in the streets for the past few weeks to denounce the massacre that took place in the past few months in Gaza. And as you can see next to me today stand the brave rabbis, the authentic Jews who are representing the beautiful faith of Judaism, who are rejecting the attempt of the Zionists